So I know you guys have been wondering about many different things when it comes to drive discs and exactly how they work, how they function, just kind of everything about them in general. And since you guys have been having those questions, I want to just answer them and kind of talk about everything going on when it comes to disk drives, what their major role and importance is in Zenless Zone Zero, and just explain everything what it has to do about drive discs. So hello guys, my name is Mr. Ocean, and without further ado, let's just get started. So kind of the first thing I want to talk about first is exactly what is a drive disk. And the best example I can give for people that have played Genshin Impact or have heard of Genshin Impact, there are things called artifacts. And so these artifacts have specific stats and specific characteristics to either amplify or either hinder the character depending on what you get and what stats you'll roll. And so the stats that we have so far are HP, attack, defense, impact, crit rate and crit damage, anomaly mastery and anomaly proficiency, pen ratio, pen, energy regen, energy generation rate, energy limit, and all of the elemental type bonus damage. And so you might ask, why is that important and what are these all meaning? And so essentially these are all separated stats that will benefit your character also depending on what kind of character type and what kind of character you're prioritizing of. For example, we have, say, Billy Kid, for example. What he's primarily going to want to have is pen ratio, because for pen ratio, he's essentially going to be piercing the enemy's defense damage by essentially attacking the enemy more and more and more. Let's also say, for instance, we have a stun character. So like for stuns, you would want to prioritize impact, because impact is going to increase their days and increase that accumulative rate that you will be able to stun / daze that enemy. And same follows with other characters as well. Like for support, they have their own as well. For anomalies, it's the anomaly mastery, anomaly proficiency, since you want to cast the anomalies as hard and as quick as possible. These are essentially going to be increasing your stats depending on which stats you want to be improved on and what stats you need to then cater towards that specific character that you're working on and you're building. And we need to clarify that not every drive discs have their exact stats. They can't all have the same thing. They're all specific to different things. So the main stats of drive discs are kind of limited into their numbers. And I know the system is a little bit confusing at first looking at all 6. So to kind of start off with, your first drive disc is always going to be HP. Its main stat is always going to be HP because you're needing more health. Your second drive disc is going to be attack, which is flat attack. It's not attack percentage, so it's just attack. Next, you're going to have your third, which is going to be defense. And defense is important for certain characters. So far, it seems that we have Ben, which is the only defense character that caters towards having defense. There might be more characters in the future, but so far defense isn't really that important so far in this game. Next, we have drive disc 4, which this one is highly important also depending on the type of character that you have. So there might be certain characters that are dealing damage that you're going to need to cater to having crit rate and crit damage, as to others are going to have incentives of having anomaly or even HP at times. But so far what you can have on the main stats for drive disc 4 is attack ratio, HP, defense, crit rate, crit damage, and anomaly proficiency. As for disc 5 is kind of going to be catered towards that actual character's elemental type, and you're most likely going to want to do that just so you can increase their elemental damage, because most likely every single character in the game so far casts elemental damage. That's granted. It only depends if that character is more proficient at using things like defense, HP, or even attack, but most of the time you're going to use their elemental damage. And for the main stat that's available is going to be attack ratio, HP ratio, defense ratio, pen ratio, physical damage, fire damage, ice damage, electric damage, and ether damage. And so these are going to be where you're going to want to have the elemental type damage of which character that you're using these disk drives for. And lastly, for drive disc 6, this one is also important as well. It's just kind of depending on what your character is lacking most of the time, or as well what you're wanting them to boost into. So for what stats are available here are attack ratio, HP ratio, defense, anomaly mastery, impact, and energy recharge. And these are also good as well. You just really have to figure out what what your character is lacking for the most part, and you kind of want to fit in from there what you want to go with. And so the next thing I want to talk about is how do you obtain these drive discs. So throughout the story and even throughout gameplay, you will earn certain drive discs throughout time, but in order to kind of gain more, you kind of will be introduced to the music store, and the music store is essentially feels like you're pulling a 1 pull or 10 pull on like certain items. And what feels a little bit beneficial on this one rather than say Genshin Impact or even other gacha games so far is that once you get later down in the game and you kind of raise higher into your Intronaut level, you can essentially track, or you can even find the certain orientation of your actual drive disc. So say for instance, I want to have a certain, drive disc, like I want drive disc 5. I can cater to that and I can specifically try to roll for this. But the only thing is I'm only getting drive disc 5, but it's only going to be within these categories of main stats that I'll possibly get. And that's the only thing I can try to work for. So it's essentially like a form of a mini pool or a mini gacha system where you're essentially pulling for random drive discs. Another way you can go ahead and obtain drive disc is by going to the cleanup. And so essentially the cleanup is going to be providing you with certain ways to obtain different types of drive discs. So say for instance, I want to go for a certain type. So say for instance, I want to get chaotic metal, or I want to get other types of drive discs that cater towards a certain character that I want to get. You can use your batteries, which cost 60 each time. Depending on which level you are, you will get 2 of that stat. So since I'm Intronaut level 40, I'm going to be getting guaranteed 2 gold drive discs, along with the rest going to be purples and level materials as well. And this is a good way later down the line. I wouldn't recommend it now, because the reason why is because doing this, you want to do it when you're higher so you can have a better chance of getting those S ranks rather than having a lot more A ranks, which you're going to end up discarding later on. So it's better to do that. And I think as of right now, they're not totally the beneficial way. I would rather just use the music store whenever you have a chance or whenever you have enough materials in order to pull for 10. And so let you guys know how important drive discs are, because I know some people are going to kind of tell you like drive discs are not as important right now, or you shouldn't really invest into them as much. I feel like they're important for many cases because there's only so much you can do with your stats, because the only thing you can be able to increase with your stats is when it has your W engine, and they kind of have different stats as itself, but it only has one substat along with the attack stat. So like say for instance, you have Anby and you want to increase your impact. That's where you want to put that into play. Or say for instance, you have Billy and you want to increase his crit rate or crit damage. So let me put this into an example. So right now, Billy is at 1310, and that's also including his W engine along with his drive discs, right? So let's say I unequipped every single one, right? Let's unequip every single one. I'm at 1092. So I went down around 300, roughly around 300. That's a pretty big margin. And as later on, as we get into the game, it's going to probably start getting higher. It's going to get even more higher, and it's going to become more. Another thing that's also important about drive disc is their specific stats and their specific set pieces or set bonuses that they have. So each drive disc has a 2-piece set and a 4-piece set, which will end up applying more. So if you have a 2-piece set, it's just going to be the basic form of what that is, and it will amplify more with that 4-set piece. So let's say, for example, I have Ellen, right? And I want to, or even better yet, say for instance, have Juyahan, right? And I want to increase her ether damage. So I get chaotic metal. So for the 2-piece, it's going to give me 10% extra ether damage, which is what she casts. And that's something that's very important because you want extra damage. And that 10% is going to be a good margin depending on how much you have. And also additive to, say for instance, I have a drive disc 5 and I add even more ether damage to it. So you're adding even more percentage to your ether damage. And so that's just for the 2-piece. So say for instance, for the 4-piece, the equipper's crit damage is increased by 20%. And when the character or any character in the squad triggers corruption, in addition, damage is then increased by 5.5 for 8 seconds. And this can stack up to 6 times, repeating triggers reset during the duration. So you're adding even more damage on top of it, let alone if you're casting corruption, which is an anomaly effect, you're going to be able to do more and more damage. And so it also depends on any of these drive discs. So they all have their certain abilities. Some can increase your damage by 20% with your ultimates, or others can increase your crit rate and increase the amount of attack damage with your dodge counters, EX skills, and everything else. Others can increase your defense and take 40% less damage. Others as well can give you more energy, and launching change attacks or anything else will increase your damage. So mostly these drive discs are to cater the specific characters that you have. And these certain character types will be looked at more and more. And it's not to say that it's the end all be all for those drive discs, because there are some drive discs that will be beneficial more than others. Like say for instance, we have a character in the future, right? So let's just say for example, Ellen is wanting to be beneficial with ice damage and say crit rate and crit damage. Let's say a different character, right, does a good amount of damage just as much as Ellen does, but in order for her to stack more damage, she needs to have more defense, or she needs to have more HP. It's kind of like the example of Hu Tao in Genshin Impact. She needs to stack up more HP. Sometimes people will give her HP rather than pyro damage, because her stacking more HP will benefit and provide her more damage. So just keep in mind, anything that I say right now isn't an end all be all. So I'm gonna just give you an example just for like how I would build, say, Zhu Yuhan, for example, right? So we're gonna just use a Nicole right now because I don't have her. So let's say for instance, I'm using her, right? So I'm gonna want to use 4-piece chaotic metal, which is beneficial because she's increasing her ether damage, and she's also gonna increase crit damage and more damage as well on top of that as she casts corruption, or even her teammates cast corruption. So most likely Nicole's gonna be on her team, and casting corruption is gonna be beneficial for her. So what else might you ask? You might add, because we only have 4 pieces, and in total we have 6 drive disc slots. And so with that, we might want to add Woodpecker Electro, which might add my crit rate because I might be lacking in my crit rate. Or I might want to add pen ratio, which is a Puffer Electro, because I want to increase that as well. It's also going to cater onto that part. So it's depending on what character you have and what they do specifically more, that you want to focus on that. And then whatever stats or whatever that you have left, you want to kind of help cater or help boost those stats that they're lacking of, so that they're kind of more well balanced. So like I said, so with Zhu Yuhan, like you would want a 4-piece chaotic metal and maybe a 2-piece Woodpecker Electro and a 2-piece Puffer Electro. And another thing I wanted to add is your substats. Your substats is going to be something important that you're going to want to look at as well when you get later in the game, because earlier in the game it's not as important. If you just kind of want to focus on the main stat a little bit earlier in the game, and you can go through the game that way. But once you get later in the game towards like the Shiru defense and Hollow Zero, that's when you're going to really want to focus on basically maxing the proper potential of your character. So like what I have for Ellen, for example, she has basically Polar Metal and Harmone Punk. So let's say I'm just looking at this piece right now. I'm looking at a Thunder piece that's for an electric character. And so I have the attack stat, but I kind of have like HP, pen, defense, and defense, right? So this kind of has not really the best stats for like say an attack character. Let's say if I'm trying to build for an attack character, this is not the greatest stats that I'll have for that character. Sometimes what's beneficial for you is you want to say, for instance, you have like say 1 stat or 2 stats. So let's try to find one, for example. So this is a great one, for example. So we have a Puffer Electro with attack and crit rate, right? And just going to use this for now for an example. So say for instance, I want to upgrade it to the next stage. It's only going to be beneficial to go up by each stage, and you don't want to level it up all the way initially, because doing that is going to kind of hinder your XP, and it's kind of going to be bad, because what if you get a bad piece and you don't want it anymore, or you think that you don't want it? So it's beneficial to only upgrade to the next stage, because look, for right now I have pen ratio, which is good, and if I add one more, I have HP. So right there, I kind of would stop right there, because once you get like S rank drive discs, you can possibly increase it to only this stat, and that's bad because you're not increasing your crit rate, or you're not increasing that pen ratio. So you're not increasing the more beneficial stats, you're only increasing that stat that's not really useful to you. And with HP in this game, HP is not that beneficial because you kind of don't really get hit all that much, and you don't really take that much damage in this game. So it's important to kind of look for the beneficial stats in this game to kind of work for, and only do it in small increments up to the next stage. Do not level up your drive discs all the way to the max immediately. So you want to focus on that. And then if you guys want to know the specific stats and benefits that each stat does, or even as well as the disc drives, like which disc drives benefits what are the 2-piece set and 4-piece set, I can leave a link down in the description below to let you guys know what those things does. So I kind of hope I helped you guys understand how drive discs work, and hopefully you guys are a little bit more informed now and can go through your account and see what things you want to help out with your character, or what specific stats that they have. And again, with how you build your character and how you play your character, it depends on what stats you're using, but there is most of the time very beneficial stats that are catered towards different character types. So if you guys want to look at my other guides or character videos, or even more character videos that I have in the future, you can make sure to check those out, and you kind of can see what characters or which character that you're going to use, what stats are beneficial for them. And so hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure to leave a like and comment down below, and hit that subscribe button, and make sure to hit the bell notification to be notified whenever I post a new video. I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I will talk to you guys later.